With the 2025 draft over and my grade video finally out, I wanted to go through a few of the biggest draft steals, in my opinion, from the 2025 draft. Prospects that I think got pretty good value where they ended up. Now, of course, because they're on this list, that doesn't automatically mean they'll be future NHL studs, but I just want to go through the guys that I think maybe should have gone a little bit higher and were pretty undervalued in this draft class. These could be guys that could be in the first round up to the 7th round. No matter how they were disrespected, we're going to give them some respect today. So make sure you guys watch till the end as we go through all the top prospects from each round to see which are the biggest steals of the draft, and make sure that subscribe button if you're new for more draft content just like this as we lead up to the 2026 draft now, next year. Now, as we go through the 15 prospects today, we're going to start with the players that were drafted first and then end off with the player that had been drafted last among the biggest draft steals of the group. Let's start out with the biggest draft steal, especially to me at least, in the top 10 of this year's class, in James Hagens. Are you guys surprised to see him at this spot? I don't think you really should, especially after my reaction to the Bruins drafting him. It really was kind of a shock because the Bruins have pretty consistently over the last few years gone for translatable type of players. And when they go for a big swing in a Dean Lortourneau, they're usually not very good players anyways. So to see them go after a James Hagens who's a swing but also has so much talent and is actually good by himself was a bit of a shocker, but my goodness, it is a franchise-changing selection. Especially to get him at 7th overall, I think for the Bruins, it was the perfect pick to make. And in Hagens' case, I think he is going to be a fantastic top 6 centerman for them. Even though I have some concerns still, I want to see him add some more muscle, get a little bit more faster in the neutral zone. This guy is still great in transition. The vision, the creativity with the puck on his stick is among the best in this class. The speed and hands combo might be the best in the class in all honesty. And to see the Bruins go after that type of elite talent, it's kind of refreshing to see. I still think he's probably another year away, and I think he will do good being a little bit farther in this draft and it not being as big of a problem if he goes back to college, because I think he should go back to BC next year and really dominate the NCAA next season, learn some more lessons and get a little bit more quicker, and I think that'll ultimately do him some good. And I think once he gets into that Bruins lineup in 2027, things are going to get nasty. And there will be people that'll say he's not a draft steal if he's in the first round. I think any player can be a draft steal. It's just about where they went compared to where I think they should have gone. And in Hagens' case, to me, he was a top 3 prospect pretty definitively for me in this class, and to go at number 7 is still a pretty massive drop. Let's go on to the second draft steal to talk about today here, and this goes outside of the top 15, but just barely outside of it. The New York Islanders got themselves a heck of a pick, getting Victor Eklund at 16th overall. In some ways, I was expecting a player like Eklund to fall likely around that 11 to 13 range, either being picked by the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Detroit Red Wings, but I really didn't think he would get past Detroit. That's when things started to get a little bit interesting, and Eklund eventually stopped dropping, and he went 16th overall to the Islanders, and my goodness, I mean, after getting Matthew Schaefer as a transformative first overall pick, Eklund's the perfect complementary player for this team going forward, and exactly what I think they need. Even though he's not the biggest player, like I mentioned before, Eklund is an absolute dog. Along the boards, this guy is relentless. I think the best board battler in this entire draft. You're going to have a ton of people saying that Brady Martin is this ultra physical type of player, but I think a player like Eklund is even more efficient in getting turnovers, creating chaos with his size, even though he's not very big, and just making things simple. He'll go to the net, he'll score goals, he'll do everything for you. I think in Eklund's case, he's kind of one of the more disrespected players in that aspect, because really, if he was 6'2" doing what he's doing, I think he'd be a top 3 pick, and definitively. So to me, the Islanders got extreme value in this position, and I think especially for them, the wing was looking a little bit of an interesting part for their system. In the prospect pool, it was a bit of an issue, but I think they really do get a good one here in a future top 6 piece. On to my third draft steal of the day, and the second to last one in the first round. After these next two, we'll get into the later rounds, of course, but I need to talk about Lyndon Lakovich finding himself to 27 and the Washington Capitals. This was a surprise and a shock to me, because even though I saw Lakovich falling a little bit in this draft, I saw him falling more towards like number 20 rather than number 27. But to me, this was a guy that I ranked 15th in my draft board for some very clear reasons. When the puck is on his stick, he is undeniable. And there is some problems, of course, with his consistency and his work ethic. I understand that. But I think Lakovich is still a pretty smart player and knows what he needs to work on. And I think those are things that he will end up working on. The conditioning, I think, also can come away too. And if it does, this guy is an absolute wizard. He can do so many things that so few prospects in this draft are capable of. And that combined with the size, if he just gets like 50% more engaged. This guy is a top 6 wing automatically for me. So yes, there is question marks, and I can see still why he'd end up dropping. I can see why all these guys drop. It's for a different matter of reasons. But in Lakovich's case, he has, I think, a pretty high chance of making teams look silly. And of course, the Washington Capitals get away with it yet again. On to number 32, and the last first-round pick to talk about here. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Colin Potter going to the Calgary Flames at 32. Ranked number 10th in my prospect rankings. He, to me, is just such a unique blend of the best skating of the draft, while also having some of the highest-end hands in the draft, too. In transition, this guy can do so much for you, and brings it at an intense pace and an intense speed that, again, not many people are able to bring in this class. I mean, to me, especially off the puck, there's so much engagement, so much speed. You saw that at the U18s, just how good he was at creating turnovers, even though he's not the biggest player in the world at 5'10", 172 pounds. The biggest issue to me is the muscle and that frame and how much it's able to translate, especially if he is to play center long term. I think it is still more likely that he plays wing, but I thought he was good as a center all year long for Arizona State. So there will be a question mark there for Calgary, but my goodness, that's a pool that could use some more high-end swings. Potter is a ton of fun and a ton of talent wrapped into one neat little bow. And to get him at 32 overall, I'll take that quite a bit if I'm the Flames. Now, starting us out in the second round draft picks that I think were absolute steals here, let's go on to Malcolm Spence going to the New York Rangers and finding himself at the 43rd overall selection. And I'll say this, if the Rangers kept their 12th overall pick, somehow they kept that pick they wanted to select with it, and they selected Malcolm Spence, I think that would have been less of a surprise than Malcolm Spence ending up at 43 like he did. To me, I think Spence is a marvelous player, and I think projects extremely well as this great, efficient, speedy third line wing. Good physicality, good brain on him. The big problem to me is just the lack of pure pop in his game. I want to see more skill on display, but to see somebody that is so projectable as an NHL player go at number 43 is just kind of baffling to me. So we'll see what ends up happening. He could get screwed up by the Rangers development team, but honestly, he's a pretty pro, refined player already, so I don't think there's much to screw up. Now let's go into another Metro team in this second round, just a few picks later that I think also got some tremendous value. Let's go into the Philadelphia Flyers, getting Shane Van Sage at the number 48 selection. I absolutely adore this for a Flyers team that was very clearly prioritizing size in this year's draft. Well, you go for a guy that I love with his size and his physicality in Shane Van Sage. To me, I think this is just a slam dunk move to make. This is a future NHLer in really all respects. The only thing, and this is a theme that we saw with the Flyers draft class, that's an issue, is the skating speed and how efficient he will be as a forechecker because of that. But to me, he's so smart with his positioning, so smart with how he puts himself and his body out there. He's an intense player. He'll get around you with that body and stick and just hem you in as a defenseman. And I think for Van Sage, especially that net front ability, that ability to overpower defensemen and just use his physical prowess to dominate people. And this isn't him doing this in like the OHL. This is him doing it in the NCAA consistently as an 18-year-old. He, to me, just is so impressive with how he puts himself out there. You're getting a simple, refined, I think 500-plus NHL game career out of Van Sage pretty much immediately. I think this is just a home run move to make. And I think there is some more little bit of skill, especially once the cycle gets going, than has been led on either. So I think for Philadelphia, fantastic pick. They made some pretty solid ones, I would say overall. Some ones that were a little bit of a reach, but Van Sage is just a steal no matter how you slice it. Maybe that's my NCAA bias showing through because that's easily the league I watch the most, but as a Wisconsin Big Ten fan, when I tell you that Van Sage is just a monster, he's a monster. Now, on to the next draft steal here. Let's go on to another guy that will be coming into the Big Ten here pretty soon, in Cole McKinney of the San Jose Sharks. Now, San Jose, I think, had a pretty strong draft, all things considered. Of course, Misa is the prize at second overall, but Cole McKinney, I think, could prove to be a really, really good second-round selection. At 53, I think he is just house money, similar to a Shane Van Sage. Plays such a pro-ready style game. The big thing to me with McKinney is how speedy he is as a forechecker. He isn't afraid to use that big body either to create chaos. And I think Van Sage is even a little bit more projectable just because the physical traits. But in McKinney's case, I think he has a little bit more pop in him, a little bit more substance to the offensive game. And I would not be surprised if he could be good enough to be a third line center someday. Most likely will be a 4C, but I think in McKinney's case, you're also getting a very projectable, safe, ready center here in the future. And for a team like the Sharks that has their top 6 pretty much lined up right now, figuring out that bottom 6 for the future is a priority, and McKinney's going to be a big part of it. Now, at number 62, it was a matter of time, really, before we got into the Carolina Hurricanes, and we need to talk about one of the biggest ones that they stole off in Ivon Reabkin. Now, spoiler alert, this will not be the last time we mention the Carolina Hurricanes in today's video, but in Carolina's case, even though most of the time it might not work out, they just go for the high upside swings and the guys that end up falling and just seeing what the heck happens with them. And in Ivon Reabkin's case, I think it's a very worthy bet to make. I would have expected if the Canes didn't end up taking him that he'd fall probably into the third, maybe even fourth round, but he finds himself at the 62nd selection, and if he actually starts giving a crap about his game and finding the intensity, finding a fire within him, this guy could be absolutely insane. The goal scoring, the power play ability, when he finds just a little bit of open space, this guy can be so incredibly lethal. You see the production of the USHL, great production. When he is on his game, this guy is insane. It's just finding that extra little bit, extra gear, that extra intensity that I think will be a problem for him. But in the late second round, this to me, on pure talent alone, is a first rounder. So if you're able to unlock that, who the heck knows? You could get a special player here. Now let's move on to another one that I wasn't really too surprised to see fall, but still I think will end up proving to be potential value here in the end, in Adam Banach. Now, I was debating quite a bit between Banach and LJ Mooney when it comes to the little guy steal of the draft, but I think Banach fits Minnesota especially well at 102nd overall. He, to me, brings a lot of good traits for a smaller forward that I look for. Smarts, but intensity and hard work ethic. He, to me, from everything I've heard about especially, isn't just this, guy that feeds off his skill and that's it at 5'8". This guy is willing to put in the work to get better. The big issue, of course, with Banach and LJ Mooney will be the strength that they end up accumulating over the next little bit, because they, in both cases, absolutely need more muscle. But Banach had a great USHL season, unbelievable playmaker, unbelievable processor in all three zones. This guy is just seeing the game ahead of so many players on the ice. I am desperately hoping he pops, because this guy is just so much fun, but I have a feeling in Minnesota system, he has the potential to do so. Them trading Marco Rossi right now might be a bit of a question mark towards that, but as of right now, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. Now let's move on to another European center here, as to me a pretty great value pick. Let's go on to Gustaf Hilstrom out of the New Jersey Devil system now, and he was a fourth rounder, 114th overall by New Jersey, and kind of like the Cole McKinney type of pick. This to me is just a future bottom six center to a T. Great size, 6'2", 176 pounds. He knows how to use it. Great on the penalty kill. Fantastic face-off percentage as well in the Junior 20 this year, and in the SHL when he was going against men. I don't think looked out of place whatsoever. It's just a strong defensive player, good reads on the ice, rarely makes too many mistakes. The big question will be how much offense there is in him, but as a fourth line center, I think he's going to do everything you want in that role. To me, I'm kind of just curious how he ended up dropping to 114th overall. Maybe there's something we don't know about, I'm not sure, but in Hillstrom's case, I think especially with the defensive habits, with how much he projects as an NHLer, especially among Europeans in this class, I think New Jersey got themselves a heck of a deal here. I mean, I think New Jersey overall did pretty solid. This was, to me, though, the biggest value out of everything. Now, you'll notice as well, especially with the next few picks, there are a lot of Swedes that I think kind of got a bit disrespected maybe in this draft order. Next up, let's go on to the Winnipeg Jets and their selection in Victor Klingselj. I think in the Jets case, they had a strong draft. They went for some high upside. I mean, especially going for a D in Sasha Boumedian in the first round. Another Swede right there going to Winnipeg. But Klingselj, to me, is just an electric factory. This guy is just so good with his habits up the ice. He's a smaller guy at 5'10", of course, but this year in the Junior 20, great production. The goal scoring, I think, will be a massive thing for him going forward. He is just so much fun. And to have that type of selection in the 5th round, I think you're just playing with house money. To me, this was a top 3 round type of caliber talent, and the Jets get him in the 5th round. There is, of course, the question marks, but I will say I think he handles pressure pretty well. And as you can see, 5'10", 100 and almost 90 pounds. I mean, the guy packs a bit of a punch with his muscles, so I wouldn't count him out in that whatsoever. But I just really like that fit for the Jets and Klingselj. I think Klingselj will really be good in that system, especially as, I think, a third liner in the future. He's not going to be a grinder by any means, but I think as kind of a Nino Niederreiter type of position on that team, I could see him filling that type of hole. Now we move on to one of my favorites, of course, in this draft class. Let's go on to the Croatian man himself in Bruno Ajan, who, my goodness, to get him in the 6th round Ottawa, you guys could probably already tell by my draft grades video, but I adored this class by the Ottawa Senators. Love seeing them get Henny earlier on. I think Ajan is, though their greatest value pick in this year's draft. Somebody that I ranked inside my top 60. He has grown leaps and bounds over the last year. You're looking at a player as an overager that was playing in the junior 20 last year and had some decent production, but nothing all that crazy. This year, he steps into the Alps Hockey League and absolutely crushes it. 21 goals in 19 games, and then comes over to the USHL and is even better. In 36 games, 22 goals, 44 points, one of the top USHL producers this last year, and it's a hard league to score in. To get 22 goals in 36 games, 44 points, he was an absolute animal. The biggest thing to me with Ajan is the finishing and just how successful and efficient he is at finding that open space. That's, to me, the thing that separates him from some of the other power play guys that you could find in this draft. Ajan, to me, is just so good at finding that extra space, and with how strong he is, too. He's not a big bruiser at 6 foot, but he's 194 pounds. This guy is physically developed. I don't know what he did last summer, but it's working. So I think for the Sens, it's a 6th round pick, so if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. But I think in Ajan's case, you're looking at a potential 3rd line power play sniper if he ends up working himself out, with the muscle and I think the strength to be able to not be a defensive black hole if he were to make it. Now let's move on to another Swede that I think got a little bit disrespected in the draft order this time around. Let's go on to Arvid Drott and the Florida Panthers, who I think had a very underrated class this year. You had players like Shamar Moses, who I was a little bit close to putting on this list as well, but Arvid Drott in the 6th round, just my goodness, give me that every single day. One of the youngest players in this draft class, 6 foot, 187 pounds, so like in Ajan, pretty bulky for his size. But I think in Drott's case, he is such a brilliant skater, such a talent when he does have the puck on his stick, and I think the speed especially is what his game is really catered to the most. I'm surprised to see the Panthers of all team draft him, but I would wonder, I'm curious about Florida, that they know that a lot of teams are overcorrecting, trying to go in the Panthers mold, and then they realize, hey, let's get some skill. Let's just draft the guys at these spots and try to get some potential in our system while other teams are going for these big, bulky guys. In Drott's case, I think he could be a really good fit with the speed he possesses. I think just slowing the game down will be the biggest problem that could maybe force him out of an NHL lineup one day, but at the same time, I'd rather have the skill and try to teach him to rein it back a bit than the other way around. But let's go on to the last player to mention here today, and yet another Swede on today's list. To me, maybe the biggest steal out of everybody that we've talked about today. Let's go on to Filip Ekberg, finding himself at the 221st position. Of course, to the Carolina Hurricanes. I put out a tweet in the 7th round as this thing was going, wondering if Filip Ekberg as a U18 World Junior MVP would end up going undrafted in a draft year. That I don't feel like has ever happened. I haven't kept track or anything, but it would be shocking to me if it's happened very recently. In Ekberg's case, it would have been an absolute shame if that happened. And the Carolina Hurricanes thankfully saved Ekberg's life, getting him right at the end of the 7th round. And I'll say this, I completely understand why Ekberg would drop. He's a very transitional based forward, which works for some teams, doesn't work for others. So I think that kind of automatically puts him out of some teams' lists. Carolina, though, I mean, they are a team that always looks to start the transition, always looks to use the skill first, and Ekberg, of course, does bring that. I think he's I say he's mostly a transition player, but he's a really good transition player. This guy in on-man rushes with his speed can do so much, is very efficient when he does get those offensive opportunities. And of course, what he was able to do to the U18 speaks for itself. 10 goals, 18 points in 7 games. I also thought extremely underrated in the OHL this year. Didn't get much time under Dave Cameron in the Ottawa 67 system. I think should have been. But he's somebody that I think kind of got overlooked. And I think next year with maybe a bigger role, hopefully, or maybe on a different team, hopefully, because Dave Cameron doesn't seem to like him, I think Ekberg is due for an explosion. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But 7th round value, you can't get many players that are at this point just better hockey players than Filip Ekberg at this point. What a home run by the Carolina Hurricanes. But those to me are the biggest draft steals in this 2025 NHL draft. There are some players I didn't end up mentioning. I mentioned Shamar Moses as a potential pick by the Panthers. Of course, LJ Mooney is one that I like quite a bit. But guys like Kurban Limatov, also another good Canes pick. Eric Nielsen, I thought was a really good ad at 45 for the Anaheim Ducks. So definitely not a lack of draft steals in this year's class. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was a ton of fun to see which players I think maybe should have got a little bit higher, but to also explain why they might not have, what they could prove wrong. A lot of fun to talk about here today. today. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys did enjoy, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and the notification bell, and comment down below your thoughts on all these guys. Who do you think of the 15 names I mentioned you have the most confidence in out of your team and who they drafted? Who do you think maybe gets the most underrated? Let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, should have been for all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my 2025 draft content, including the grade video, which is an hour long of prospect analysis. So if you want to hear more about your team, go click on that and have yourself a ball. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.